guys, it's Stasia. Welcome back to my channel. So today, as you can tell by the title, we're doing part 2 of my October wrap-up. And here are most of the books. Some of them I needed to read like as an ebook, but there's most of them. So in my part 1 wrap-up, I was reading 2 books at that time, and it was Shadow of the Fox and Station 11. I ended up finishing Shadow of the Fox first. So this was my 16th read of the month. This one was okay. I gave it 3.5 stars. I mainly just needed to read it because it was the Owl Crit edition, and I got it at some point. So it ended up on my TBR for the prompt of a non-human protagonist. She's like a half fox thing. It's called like I don't know, but she's kind of like a shapeshifter type of thing. So basically the main character is named Yumiko, and something happens where she needs to go on a journey to find something, and it's hard to explain because I don't want to like spoil anything, but she needs to go on the journey and runs into someone else who isn't quite who he says he is. And yeah, I mean, it was okay, but I'm also not really like a fantasy person. I think if you're a fantasy person, maybe you would enjoy this one, but I just didn't really care as much for their adventure. The next book I finished was The Wicker King, and I read this for mental health rep. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I think the format I needed to read it in kind of like messed up the experience, because I know a lot of people gave it 5 stars, 4.5, like it was really high up there, but I needed to read it via ebook from my library, so it wasn't like as immersive, I would say. I do still think the topic was very well done, and I think that if you have had experience or you understand this topic of mental health, then it's a very good book. But if you don't really get it as much, I feel like it might go over some people's head and they'll just be like, okay. I'm sorry if you guys can hear my dogs. The next book I ended up reading was Station 11, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I thought that reading it during a pandemic would have heightened my experience, but they're like way further into the future after the pandemic. This isn't really it isn't focused as much about like when it first hits, but it focuses a lot like many years later where they're still trying to survive. But it was a really good read and a really fast read, so I liked it. Next I read Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell, and this was my first Lisa Jewell book, so I was very excited because she's a very hyped thriller author that I never read from until this month. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. Throughout the entire book, you know what happened and you know like what's happening, but I feel like the underlying question is why. So there's multiple perspectives in this book. Basically, a girl, Ellie, is like the perfect daughter, and she goes missing. So we kind of get the perspective of Ellie, the person who got her, or like her capture, and then like her parents' family type of stuff. So it was really good. I can't quite pinpoint why it wasn't a 5 star. It dragged quite a bit for me for some parts, which is kind of weird. And then I felt like because we knew everything and we were kind of just figuring out like the why, I felt like it was slightly less interesting and less thrilling because we already knew the outcome instead of like trying to guess it. Next, I read The Glass Forest for a prompt of a psychological thriller. I was really looking forward to this one because I haven't heard anything about it, and I really love when I go into my thrillers knowing absolutely nothing. But this one really fell short for me. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It was okay. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It has multiple perspectives and dual timelines. So basically it's about this girl named Angie and her husband Paul. Paul's brother dies and then his wife goes missing. So their daughter Ruby, the daughter of the brother and his wife, calls, and she calls her uncle Paul, and she's like, hey, like, this is what's going on. you know, my dad is dead and my mom is missing. So Angie and Paul try to go to this house and, you know, kind of figure out what's going on and see how they can help her. But things get twisty, things get revealed. I did appreciate the multiple timelines because it's kind of like the before what led up to the actual event, and then like them trying to deal with what happened after without knowing anything. So I appreciate that. But it's a very plot driven book, I would say. The characters I really didn't care about as much, so I feel like that made me not enjoy it as much. But I mean, it's not a bad book. It just was very boring for me at times, a lot of the times. Next, I read Isla and the Happily Ever After, and come on, like, this is probably my favorite contemporary trilogy. It's so good. So this was the last book of the companion novels for Anna and the French Kiss and then Lola and the Boy Next Door. So this is the third and final one, and honestly, I wish there were more. So this follows Isla, and instead of following like someone completely new, her love interest was actually in the first book, Anna and the French Kiss, and he was in like that friend group. So I really loved seeing him again, and honestly, they were so cute. So for this one, since they aren't companion novels, you don't necessarily need to read them all or read them in order. But I highly, 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 highly recommend that if you end up picking up this one and you have not read Anna and the French Kiss first, I highly recommend reading Anna and the French Kiss first. Honestly, I think that you should read them in order. I think you should go Anna and the French Kiss, Lola and the Boy Next Door, and then Isla and the Happily Ever After. But they are companion novels, so it's not like needed necessarily for the first one. But if you read this one before you read the first one, Anna and the French Kiss, there's like a major spoiler. So I mean, it depends how you want to go about it. But this one follows Isla, and she is at the School of America in Paris, which is where the first book takes place. And this actually takes place a year after the first one of Anna and the French Kiss. So Josh, who was in the original friend group, all of his friends graduated, and now Isla is like into him, and he's just going about his life. I love them all. Like, I really do. They were all 5-star reads for me, but I think the time I read this one made this one better for me. So this is kind of my favorite out of the three, but honestly, I just want to reread them all over again. Like, I love this trilogy. Next, I read To Kill a Kingdom, and I was excited and nervous for this book because a lot of people loved it, but once I posted that I was reading it, a lot of people started coming out, and they were like, oh, I just thought it was okay, like, it wasn't that great, and I was like, I hope I love it, because I remember when it came out, like, I remember hearing a lot of great things about it, so I was like, so excited when I picked it up. It was a 3-star. I didn't care for it. It was okay. I did not like the sirens in here at all. Like, at all. But it is dual perspective. So we follow Lyra, who is a siren. And then we follow Elian, which I think that's how you say his name. But then we follow him, and he's kind of like a siren killer type of thing. And I liked Elian. I really did like his character. I felt like the biggest letdown for me was the emotions for each character. Because it's dual perspective, they should have been like very polarizing on different subjects because of who they are, like a siren and a siren killer. But I felt like a lot of it kind of like blended together, and they weren't distinct enough for me. So like, if they took away the headers on who was talking, I probably would not have known who was talking. But yeah, so 3 stars. Next, I read The Girls, which I never heard much about. I remember like seeing the title. I've seen the book a few times, but I never actually know what it was about. It's basically about a cult and this girl getting like locked up in that like mentality, thinking it's like the best thing in the world, and I honestly found it boring. I gave it 3 stars. Because I didn't hate it. It was very fast-paced, which I liked, but like, I didn't care for the characters, and the concept I thought could have been better executed when you're speaking about a cult, but it kind of fell flat a bit for me. The next book I read was One of Us is Next, and this is the second book after One of Us is Lying, But after reading this, I would say that you don't necessarily need to read the first one to read this one. So there's that. This is basically following a couple years after One of Us is Lying takes place, and in that book someone dies. So there's someone trying to frame people for someone's death basically, and in this one there's a copycat of that like whole situation. I loved this one. I gave it 4 stars. It reads very YA, like it's a YA book. I loved the characters actually. I just felt like a lot of the drama could have been avoided, like the family drama, but I mean, families are unpredictable like that, so I guess it was kind of realistic. I did not call the ending at all, so the ending made my jaw drop, so props to them for that one. I mean, I guess that's pretty much all I have to say because I don't really want to go into too much without like spoiling anything. I feel like the best way to go into thrillers is really not knowing much. Next, I read the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Now, this one, it's a horror novel, and everyone loved it. I've seen this on people's favorite horrors, favorite spooky books. Like, I was so excited to read this book. I was like, I'm gonna love it. This is gonna be great. And I didn't. I gave it 3 stars. It was way too long, in my opinion. I did not think it needed to be that long. I felt like the entire execution of the vampire was not all that interesting. The marriages and the men and the women, it was all toxic. I mean, I get it. They were trying to be like in that time frame, but yeah, I did not appreciate the toxic marriages, so no thanks. Basically, it's about this group of women who think that their neighbor is a vampire and none of their husbands believe them. That's basically what the story is, and it's 400 pages long for no reason. I was bored. But after that, I read Red, White, and Royal Blue, and honestly, I loved this. So after reading such a hype book like the Southern Book Club, I was like, oh man, maybe this one's gonna let me down too. Nope, this one is great. I loved it. I don't usually read like steamy books, so this book was really steamy for me, and for that reason, I gave it 4 stars. I was not expecting the amount of steam that was in this book, so I went into it not prepared for it. And I thought it was going to be more cutesy, you know, like more coupley, but it was less that and more steam, I felt like. So that kept it from being a 5-star for me. This is about Alex and Henry, one who is the next heir, and then one who is the son of the first female president. Basically, it's not a spoiler. They fall in love, and that's basically all I want to tell you about it. There's some scandalous stuff. There's some stuff going on in the background, but it was a very good book. It wasn't what I was expecting. I like my contemporary like romances more cutesy than steamy. So there's something I figured out about myself. I thought it was gonna drag because of how long it is. Like, it's almost 400 pages, but it's over 400 pages. But it went by so fast, and it's not all novel. There's also like text messages, a few text messages, and a lot of like emails. So that helped it go by faster too. So after that, I read Go Ask Alice, and I thought this was going to be a very hard-hitting type of book. That's really what it's tagged as and what people really say about it, and I kind of felt like indifferent to it. I didn't really care much about it. I could see why people love this one so much, but I would just say it wasn't for me. I ended up giving it 3 stars. It wasn't my favorite, but it's not the worst book in the world. And then after that, I read The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, and I honestly love this one. I gave it 5 stars. I read it in one sitting, and this is actually the only book that is not for school that I have written in, because I got this from a secondhand shop. When I started reading it, I seen that someone had like underlined certain things, so I was like, you know what, I will just go for it. So there's like some passages that I've like underlined and someone else has underlined it. It was just a great book. So this is basically about a guy named Eddie, and he dies, obviously. That's not a spoiler. And it basically goes through 5 people in his life that he has either affected greatly or has affected like his path of life greatly. And I really liked it because they don't go for like the obvious people. I mean, there's a couple people you're like, of course they have to be in there. But then there's a couple where he's like, wait, why am I seeing you? Like, what is the lesson you have to teach me? But I think that this was a great book, and I thought it was very well done. This is probably one of the few books that I will probably reread in my life. I'm not much of a rereader, but This one is great. And then after all of those books, I had a couple more days and I just wanted to get my page count and my book count up. So I ended up reading 5 graphic novels. So we'll go through those now. So the first graphic novel I read was the Handmaid's Tale graphic novel, and that one was great. I've never read the Handmaid's Tale, like the actual novel, so I didn't know what I was expecting. It was a lot more dark than I had expected. Like I said, I have no idea what I was expecting, but it wasn't what I got. For a graphic novel, I thought it like hit me really hard. So that's a book that I want to get physically because I had to borrow it from my library and I would love to own that book. That's a beautiful book. The next one I read was 1 Year at Elsmere. And that one was okay. It was 3 stars. It was a really short one. Basically about a girl going to a new school and like her figuring that out, making a new friend. There's a bully. That type of situation. The next one I read was Pumpkinheads, and Pumpkinheads I gave 4 stars. It was really cute. It was perfect for the season because it's set in a pumpkin patch on Halloween night, and it's just the cutest romance. Once I started reading it, I was already rooting for them, and then in the end, everything worked out, and it was just great. Next, I read Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me. First of all, this book is so pretty. Like, the aesthetic is like grays and pink. My favorite. So cute. So that was great. But that one is basically about a girl whose name I cannot remember right now. She has a girlfriend, Laura Dean, and Laura Dean keeps breaking up with her. So it's basically her trying to like figure out herself, her friendships, and why Laura Dean keeps breaking up with her. She's writing to a blog in like throughout the novel. So that was a really nice fun aspect. The friend group seems so fun. I would love to be in a friend group like that. And then the last graphic novel I read for the month of October was The Prince and the Dressmaker. I loved that one. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was so cute. Honestly, it was so important. It was just great. So it's basically about a prince who hires a dressmaker. He has a secret that he's trying to figure out himself, and she's trying to help him. They become friends, and he's just scared of who he really is. But I loved it. I thought it was so well done. It was so cute. Okay, so that is the final 18 books that I have read in the month of October. My final count was 33 books, which is fantastic for me. I'll never have a month that great again, that's for sure. But I've decided that for stats and all of that, I'm just going to do yearly stats. So that'll probably be in my last wrap up of December is when I'll put up the stats of all the books I've read that year, just because it's easier for me to manage like my spreadsheet instead of trying to break it up each month. I just do it as a year. So that's that. And yeah, so I will catch you guys next time. My next video will probably be my reading plan, so stay tuned for my November reading plans. I have 2 readathons I'm doing, so that's something to look forward to. But I will catch you guys in the next one. Like, comment, and subscribe down below. You can turn on the bell if you want to be notified every time I post a new video. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!